Oh, no. Third way.
Come join me. No, turn your head sideways to look at the screen for all the fun. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Capital Investment Citizen Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, January the 27th. It is 2 p.m. We'll get started with a roll call. Mr. Bowden. Kent Brown. Eric Barnsdale. Walter Steed is here. John Turnipseed. Peter Oliver. Here. Mike Portal. Here. Okay, not having a quorum, we cannot do any action items, which means the minutes of the two previous meetings will need to be moved forward to the next meeting. The election of a chair and a vice chair will have to be moved forward to the next meeting. I am vice chair, having seen our chair lady ascend up to a higher desk. So I will run this meeting today, such as it is.
Mr. Chair, just a
Yes, sir.
question, and it would be somewhat for staff. We're seeing a number of individuals that consistently over the course of many meetings are not attending. Do we need to find out, Mr. Chairman, what their agency representation issue is so that we get a functioning committee? I don't know who would have answers to that or how we go about it, but
I'll take it on myself if the staff can give me contact information. I will call them or email them, members that have not been attending directly, and see if I can get an answer there. And if I can't, I will go back to their community. We have two vacant seats, one from Boise and one from Eagle. I think our former chair was the Boise rep, so that's become vacant. And Eagle, I don't know how long that one's been vacant, but if that's okay with you, I'll work them individually and see if I can learn anything and encourage them to attend.
CCHD has reached out to those two jurisdictions with the vacancies. We did that at the beginning of January, and we have not heard back from City of Boise or City of Eagle
For the vacancies?
correct.
All right. Well, Mr. Ward's suggestion, I'll contact individuals. And if I don't get anywhere, then we'll be in touch and see about going back to the communities. Thank you. Okay. With all that being said, the next item is a presentation by staff on, of all things, impact fees, which we have had at least 2 in a row before this.
Oh, we have.
Maybe
Mr.
3?
Turnipseed coming as we speak.
oh, good.
Welcome.
No hostage by traffic.
Oh, traffic?
You can't imagine. Welcome.
Still does not give us a.
Still not
quorum,
give us a
though,
quorum.
yes.
We were just saying that not having a quorum, we couldn't do approval of minutes or election of officers. So we're going to jump right over into the staff presentation.
Okay.
So with that, who's
I was curious
Okay.
about it. Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. My name is Edison Bautista, ACHA Senior Transportation Planner. With here today, we have Megan Anderson, the co-manager for the CIP Impact Fee CIP update. She's the Impact Fee Administrator. And also we have the consultant for the update, Hiddleston, with Sonia DeLayden and Mark Heisinger. They will be leading today's presentation, but I wanted to give you guys a background of what we have gone through so far. So Last year, we have done, we have been working with the CICAC and the commission on the preliminary analysis of the impact fee and CIP. We have been working with, on specific topics, 4 of them being the service area, the range of projects, the impact fee eligibility for collectors, and the period analysis. This came out of the work we started doing in 2023, where we did visioning sessions with the commission and the CICAC. And from that, we identified several questions that came out of the commission and the committee. Now we have been deep diving each of the topics, and last year we went over the service areas back in May and July with the commission, and with the CIC on June and August. On October last year, we presented to the commission the range of projects, and this past week we presented the collector topic to the commission. Today we're gonna combine both presentations. We feel like having one single presentation for range of project was a little bit short for the meeting for the CIC meeting. So we wanted to have a more condensed, more dense presentation today. So we combined both range of project and collectors. So our goal is to highlight the major findings, the work we did through those topics, and also address any questions or concerns you might have for us today. So with that, I'll give the time to Sonia and Mark, who will lead us.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question to start. You mentioned that you've taken this information to the commission.
Yes.
Is there anything will you be telling us what the commission's response or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we can absolutely highlight the feedback we received from the commission as we go through both of these topics. Yep.
There were no decisions, they were just feedback.
That's correct. It was
Response and feedback.
It was presented to the commission in their work session time period, so really informational for them, give them an opportunity to ask questions or ask for additional information. But no formal decisions were made on these topics by the commission.
Our goal is to present all the 4 topics to them before coming back to the commission with one final summary presentation where we'll touch we'll touch base on the findings of all the topics, as well address any questions that came up from the commission at that during each of the presentation, and get a recommendation at that point.
Great. All right, well, again, I'm Sonia DeLeiden with Kittleson and Associates. I will focus on the range of projects portion of the presentation, and then Mark is going to cover the collector roadways portion. So I might just kind of fly through these first slides because Edison did a great job covering it in his intro. But just as a quick reminder, these were the 4 topic areas that we started the project, or we heard at the beginning of the project through our visioning sessions with both this committee as well as the ACHD Commission. As Edison highlighted, we spoke in our previous CICAC meetings about service area. So today we're going to focus on the range of projects topics and collector roadway topics. So as we dive into the topic area of range of projects, there were 4 key questions that we really heard on this topic area through those visioning sessions back at the beginning of this project. So the first was clarifying what can be funded through impact fees per the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act, per that legislation, what is possible. Clarifying what does ACHD currently use impact fee funding to fund. Based on what we found from those 2 questions, could ACHD expand what it is using impact fees for? And then if that's the case, what would the trade-offs be regarding expanding what we use impact fees to fund? So we'll kind of hit through those key topics as we move through these presentations. So starting off on what can be funded per the Idaho Development Impact Fee legislation. The Impact Fee Act does really categorize what impact fees can be used for by designating two different types of improvements. So first, it defines system improvements. And how it defines system improvements is any capital improvement to public facilities that's designated to provide service to a service area. So you can remember we went through 2 presentations on service area. And so it defines these improvements as ones that really provide a benefit to that full service area. That's really the intent behind that type of improvement. And these are the types of improvements it defines as being able to be impact fee eligible. The other type of improvement that the Impact Fee Act defines are what it calls project improvements. So it defines project improvements as improvements that provide service to a particular development or the occupants or users of that particular development. And this, those types of improvements, it says, are not impact fee eligible, but ACHD can condition those types of improvements through their authority as a government agency and through the conditions of approval they place on growth or development.
Excuse me if I may.
Yes.
Conditions of approval means require.
Yes, so ACHD with land use developments in Ada County, ACHD is one of the approving authorities, and they prepare a staff report for that development. And in that staff report, they can put conditions of approval in that staff report that are basically requirements for that development to move forward. So this would be something along the lines of this development needs to put in a turn lane at its site access in order to maintain operations or safety on the road, or this development may need a traffic signal at this intersection in order to maintain acceptable operations on the surrounding street system. So those types of project improvements, they're not able to be impact fee eligible because they're not, I guess, large enough to provide service to the service area as a whole, but they're really for the benefit of a particular development.
If I may, one other question, jumping
Absolutely.
back to your system improvement.
Yes.
Public bus service is not considered impact fee eligible.
You know, that's a great segue to my next slide, and I will move on to my next slide.
Glad to help.
Yeah, that's great. Just a quick example here before I do get to that next slide. So one example of a system improvement that ACHD had on the CIP and has recently spent traffic impact fee funding towards is widening and intersection improvements along Eagle Road between Victory and Amity. That stretch of road was an arterial. It's used by many people throughout Ada County, particularly in this area. And so that type of project was considered a system improvement and eligible for impact fees. Contrasting that, this traffic signal is on McMillan Road at the intersection of a collector, Oahe Storm Avenue, by the new Oahe High School. And this traffic signal was deemed necessary as part of the specific traffic impact analysis for the high school. And so that was a project improvement that was ACHD conditioned on the development of that high school because it was needed to serve traffic to and from that development. So an example to kind of show the difference of the two. But getting to your point, so the other definition that's in the Idaho Development Impact Fee Act is that the Impact Fee Act says impact fees can go towards public facilities. And it has a very it has a specific definition as to what a public facility is per the Impact Fee Act. And it really comes down to those 6 elements that are outlined in the Impact Fee Act as public facilities. So it can be roads and streets, bridges, right-of-way needed for transportation, public facilities, traffic signals, landscaping, and stormwater facilities. So these are how the Impact Fee Act defines public facilities. So without a legislative change to the Impact Fee Act to include public transit as a public facility, the way the legislation is written right now, impact fees cannot go towards funding transit. That needs to come through other elements. The other thing that's important to note about this definition is it defines projects towards these public facilities as construction, improvement, expansion, or enlargement. And that enlargement or the expansion must be based on the needed capacity to serve new development or new growth. So it's got these definitions in here that really put these goalposts on as to what can be considered impact fee eligible projects. So all that is background. We'll kind of get into this range of projects discussion.
This is why money cannot be used to fix existing problems.
That's absolutely correct. I don't have that up on the slide, but the Impact Fee Act also does talk about what specifically is not impact fee eligible. It lists things like maintenance, and it lists things like addressing an existing deficiency. Yeah, maintenance of existing facilities, yes. So with all that in as backdrop, let's talk about what ACHD's current practice is. So for many years, ACHD has implemented a strategy that aims to have development pay for itself in terms of its impacts towards future needed transportation improvements within those boundaries that are in the Impact Fee Act, but that also manages the impact fee levels and the costs that ACHD is requiring development and growth to pay. There's kind of a balance there between the projects we need, but also ensuring continued economic development within Ada County. And so this current strategy that ACHD has categorizes components of their CIP projects into those that are fully funded by impact fees, those that are partially funded by impact fees, and those that are not funded by impact fees. So you can see there, see those listed on the screen here in terms of what they deem fully funded, what they deem as partially funded, and what they deem as not able to be funded by impact fees. And this really goes back to the definition of public facilities in the Impact Fee Act. It goes into making an allowance to not spend impact fees on existing capacity. So they screen out any existing travel lanes as impact fee eligible, and so on. So, I guess I will just add the caveat though, even though it says pedestrian and bicycle facilities, ACHD's current practice has been to not fund pedestrian and bicycle facilities through impact fees. ACHD does and has had the practice of requiring development to put those in as part of frontage improvements as part of their conditions of approval.
But they are allowed, ACHD is elected not to allow.
I haven't said they're not allowed. I'm just highlighting, so ACHD's current practice is to not include the cost of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, but ACHD is still asking growth and development to pay for those. They're just doing it through frontage improvements as part of conditions of approval, as opposed through impact fee costs. So what does this look like in practice? So you saw in that table things that are fully funded, partially funded, and not funded. This is the current ACH, 2022 ACHD CIP, and it shows you what the total costs of all the projects in that CIP are, including right-of-way. And that's about $973 million. And then it also shows in the next column over, well, what portion of those total costs is currently considered impact fee eligible? And that's $641 million. So right now, of all those projects that are in ACHD CIP, only about 66% of those costs are actually being considered as impact fee eligible. So I guess in simple math, if the cost of a roadway widening project or an intersection widening project is $10 million, and that project is in the CIP and considered impact fee eligible, right now, for various reasons, because of what is being considered eligible or not, ACHD is really only collecting 66% of that $10 million. And when they go out to actually do that project, that remaining 34% is made up from other funding sources that ACHD has. Question? Yeah.
I hate to be the one, but a lot of questions.
Good. No, this is why we're here.
The 66% is a product of two things, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
One is state law. It says you can and you can't. You can, or because it's not mentioned, you can't.
Correct. Yep. That's
The
part of
other
it.
is ACHD decisions, which is will and won't.
Correct.
We will use them for this, but we won't use them for that, even though state law allows.
Exactly correct.
So-
Yes. Those are at the high level, those are really the two categories. Absolutely. And as you can imagine, there's probably a variety of reasons why decisions have been made over time about we can, but we won't. There's a variety of reasons because of that. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Sonia, just a quick question. Do you have any idea how much right-of-way percentage-wise is of that 641 million, for instance?
Yeah, so ACHD, I'll go back one slide. So ACHD does consider right-of-way for projects fully impact fee eligible. So now I will say that things are continuing to change, and the level of detail at which a project is identified in the CIP versus the level of detail when it gets to final design is a world of difference, as you can imagine. And so I'm not saying that by the time a project goes out into final design that it can't be determined that more right-of-way may be needed as to what was assumed in the CIP. But at the CIP project level, all right-of-way is assumed as impact fee eligible.
I guess my question was, how much bang for the buck do we get in terms of concrete and asphalt versus the cost of right-of-way? And this is not a critical question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we have a spreadsheet where we've looked at that, but I unfortunately don't have that number off the top of my head.
It's
Yeah.
not
And I think it laid
critical.
out in the CIP document.
Yeah,
I've done that sum total at the bottom.
Yeah.
How it shakes out.
sorry, good question, and maybe we can circle back with you on that. Yeah.
It's a curiosity more than this.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that 66% number is a good one just to keep in your head, because when it comes down to doing what we all want to have happen, which is actually getting new projects on the street system, it's important to realize that even though development is paying and growth is paying a lot of impact fees, there's still a gap there that needs to be made up to actually get that project out on the road.
Is there an easy answer to why there's such a disparity between intersection and roadway projects in terms of percentages?
So I,
30% is not small.
Yeah.
Is there an easy answer to, because intersection projects are thus therefore, or is it not that easy?
yeah, so one thing I will highlight for that is that first bullet under not funded by impact fees. and that's the reconstruction of existing roadway lanes. So, say you have a 2 or a 3 lane road today, and the CIP for that roadway identifies the need for a 5 lane road in the future. We are discounting, the current practice has been to discount from the cost of from the impact fee eligible portion of that project cost, anything that has to do with those current existing lanes there, which could be, you know, depending on what the road is today and what it is in the future, half or more of the travel lanes that are there in the future.
Even if they're rebuilt as part of the project.
Even if they need to be rebuilt,
Then
which
they will be rebuilt.
I will say probably
add lanes.
99.9% of the time, when you go out and widen a road, you can't just tack on another lane
Okay.
on each side. It's gonna
Okay.
be rebuilt. So that's probably a big portion of why the cost for roadway projects is a much smaller percentage of the actual full cost.
I think that and the pedestrian and bicycle elements would be the other big one.
Good point,
Those are
yeah,
a lot more costly on roadways than intersections.
good point. That's a great question, yeah. Okay, so moving into what are some of the potential changes? And this is what we introduced to the commission. What are some changes that you potentially could consider? And we didn't present these as recommendations, we just wanted to present them as ideas for the commission to consider. So first is, let's consider expanding what elements we consider as impact fee eligible. Obviously staying within the legislation boundaries, but maybe going beyond what ACHD's current practice have been. And if we do that, which elements should we be considering, and what are the trade-offs of doing so? So is there a way where we can move that needle a little bit beyond the 66% to get more of those projects potentially counted as impact fee eligible? So the first near-term change we said they could possibly consider would be to include the bicycle and pedestrian elements of those CIP projects as impact fee eligible. So right now, and Mark just highlighted this, with the impact fees, nothing is considered outside of that curve, right? Anything that's outside of that curve, whether it be a pathway or a bike lane or a sidewalk, none of that is considered as impact fee eligible. And ACHD that's been ACHD's practice for some time now. When we looked at this, those components are in ACHD's policy for their roadway standards. So because those are documented in policy as part of ACHD's roadway, we feel that still could meet the definition of the public facility for roads and streets that's in the Impact Fee Act. We're not recommending that's what happens necessarily, but we wanted to show the commission and show this committee how would things change if you were to consider that as impact fee eligible, not be as conservative in terms of taking that off. So when we looked at the projects in the CIP, approximately 5% of those project costs were in that bike, those bike and pedestrian elements of the projects on average. And so if we were to take that in as impact fee eligible, what would some of the considerations or trade-offs be?
I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Would equate to increase of approximately 5% in impact fees. When I first read that, it meant a policy change to raise impact fees 5%. That's not really what the case is. The case is it would equate to an increase of approximately 5% in impact fee cost. So you could keep the impact fees at the same level and do that. You just wouldn't have as many total dollars to do full streets elsewhere.
So
Am I correct?
this, I believe, yes, I think you are correct. I guess that's that note there about if you were to include the bike and pedestrian components of the project as impact fee eligible. If you did nothing else and kept all of the same projects that are in the CIP today,
Understood.
then it would increase them
Understood.
by about 5%. But that doesn't, there's other levers that the committee and the commission can adjust to maintain impact fee levels, but it probably would result in removing some of the projects that aren't expected to be out there until 20 plus years from
Correct, understood, yeah, that had me jump directly to raising impact fees,
now.
not seeing impact fee cost go up 5%,
Correct.
which is what's creating the question about the second part.
Yes, no, good
The
clarification.
Where do you get the revenue side?
Yes, good clarification. So if you were to do this, if you were to take this approach and incorporate that into the impact fees, what are some of the considerations? So the first consideration, and we highlighted this before, is that development and growth already does put that infrastructure in place. They are already conditioned with putting frontage improvements with bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And so ACHD does have a mechanism of getting that infrastructure in place. However, we did a review of what that looks like in practice. And as you can imagine, and as you've probably seen, development may go in along an arterial and put that bike and ped infrastructure in, but that doesn't mean that the CIP project for that arterial is done at the same time. It might be several years until ACHD has the funding and the priority for doing that roadway project comes online. And what ACHD has found in recent years is that in the gap between those two occurrences happening, they're not always able to save and utilize that bike and pedestrian infrastructure that went in with development when the roadway project actually comes along. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Some construction, some other unknowns. Sometimes ACHD policy changes, and instead of having an on-street bike lane on an arterial, now their policy is to do a side path. So it may, even though ACHD has asked the development to put that in, it may not be usable in the future. And so ACHD is left to cover that cost with their project themselves. Adding this component as impact fee eligible may increase the amount of impact fee revenue that's available to do project implementation in the near term. But there are also impact or economic impacts of raising impact fees or increasing the cost of your impact fees and passing that along to the development community. And that's a balance that needs to be played. So the other consideration that's out there, and again, we've talked about this a little bit. What if ACHD were to no longer exclude those existing travel lanes from their impact fee eligibility calculations? We know that when we go out to do a roadway widening project, we need to reconstruct those lanes anyways. So what if we were to include the full roadway cross-section and costs in our impact fee calculations? So again, without any other changes, that is about 25% of the project costs that we found on average for all of the CIP projects. So that without any other changes, that could result in some increases to the actual impact fees if this was done. So what are the considerations under this potential change? So one, we did find in our peer review that other agencies in Idaho are doing this. They are including that full roadway cost in their impact fees because they know when they go to do a project, it is gonna take that full cost. Increasing those impact fees would result in more impact fee revenue available to do project implementation. But this is a pretty significant change from ACHD's current practice and current systems. And I know there was some was some feedback from ACHD's legal department about whether or not that was a route they wanted to go to change what has been proven in the past. And it could result in a noticeable increase to impact fees and a potential economic impact from that standpoint.
Chairman, Sonia, there needs to be a fifth item, and that would be a significant decrease in the number of projects. I mean, in reality, there's a tipping point on impact fees, and don't have any idea what that significant increase would amount to in terms of percentage. But if you can't go full bore and you include those improvements, then you're decreasing the amount of project money that would be available. So.
Yep, great point. So again, we presented these two considerations to the commission. They asked a lot of questions, as this committee is doing as well, but did not provide any direction in terms of indicating they wanted to pursue one or didn't want to pursue one. These are all elements that they're just considering at the time, and the input of this committee is also something they were very interested in seeing as well.
They just told me to turn the page.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So again, one caveat I'll put on this is just taking today's impact fee costs and showing how they would change without any other changes if we were to apply those different considerations. These are not going to be the impact fees that come out of this 2025 update. We all know construction prices have changed dramatically, so there's going to be a lot of other factors at play. But if we were to apply that approximate 5% adjustment and include the pedestrian and bicycle elements of roadway projects as impact fee eligible, you can see the current price or the current impact fee for a single family home would go up about $200 per house. If you were to include the full roadway cross section as impact fee eligible and only do that, that would increase the impact fee per house by just under $1,000. And if you were to do both, it would increase it by about $1,100 or so. So just to see the differences in terms of if any of those considerations were applied. Like has been mentioned though, there are other tools that could be used, knowing that managing impact fees is an important relationship that ACHD has with the economic development in the valley here. So, one thing that could be done is to say, well, we do want to include the full roadway cost as impact fee eligible because it's important to recognize that is a cost for ACHD. So we're going to do that, but then we're going to adjust our overall number of CIP projects so that we're not raising impact fees by that amount in this one update. So there's a lot of different factors that could be used at play. But we wanted to present the commission with this as an understanding so they could see what some of the impacts of different decisions might be.
If I may ask Mr. Wardle a question. What impact, and you can tell me you don't know or don't want to answer if you would, what impact going to both included have on the
Well, that number
home
doesn't-
developer in terms of, would there be a cast of thousands, oh my God, meeting? Or would it be, oh, look what they're doing, but I think we can handle it, or anything in between?
Well, that number isn't as scary as what I envisioned before we turned the page, so.
And again, you don't feel like you have to answer.
No,
but-
from just a personal perspective, if we knew that the improvements were all going to be done essentially in one fell swoop, and well, we do a lot of cooperative development agreement projects. In fact, we just completed 1 mile of full reconstruction of Lake Hazel from Locust Grove to Meridian Road with all of the future lanes required for the long term and so forth. Obviously, from our perspective, we like to get ahead of doing that so that we know that we are not having to come back and Band-Aid these improvements over time. So that doesn't scare me as bad as I had feared that it might. But I'm not sure, the people that sit in the ivory tower portions of my organization would agree, but I'll certainly, I'm gonna hold that page down.
Let me remind you, this is not going to be your impact fee.
No, I
From the
understand.
2025 update, there's a lot of other changes, we're still going through.
I think
what our
I think it's
projects
a
and
great question that Mr. Steed asks, and it would be interesting to get some kind of gut reaction feedback.
And I think we may have another reaction. Do you have an
Yeah,
answer to that?
It's gonna cost more. We
Yeah,
have,
we
we have an
know that, but-
affordability issue
Yeah.
primarily on the residential side of things, so it's gonna get people's attention. And the reality is, in most cases, pass through consumer.
Oh, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah,
From a commercial standpoint, the way it trickles down is it comes down through expenses that the tenant pays, the business owner pays, so it's just raising the cost of everything. But as Mike pointed out, we need to be able to get around and growing. And so it's a discussion for private public sector to get to be. It has to happen at some point. So, but there's going to be impact, no pun intended, with higher impact fees. It's a push-pull thing. So there is no exact scientific answer at this point because there's a lot of things influencing it.
no screaming, you can't do that, but.
Oh, you will have people screaming that.
Yeah, I know you always.
And sometimes they're the same people complaining about traffic and roads being too small. and everything. So that's just the nature of the beast. Would you say, Mike?
A lot of
And it's
them are
always
folks that are waiting for somebody else to do it for them.
Right.
And then they
Or
take
pay for
advantage
it.
of it. Yes. So
So this is what we have on the topic of.
You may have thought you were just gonna present this and us tell you thank you today.
No, we are here for the questions. This is exactly what we're here for. But great discussion, great input. Anything else on this topic before I hand it off to Mark to talk about collectors? Hope I've saved you enough time. Sorry.
We'll see how fast we can move through
Yes, great. Thank you so much.
this. Yeah, so like Sonia said, we're jumping into collectors. We gave these two separate presentations, so there's a good amount of overlap, so I'll probably breeze through some of these initial slides, but pause me at any point if you have any questions. I'll try to hit on some of the key points here. So again, really just hitting at the Impact Fee Act in terms of how the Impact Fee Act addresses collector roadways. The Act doesn't actually specify what functional classifications of roadways can be funded via impact fees or not. So that's kind of where we have to look toward other definitions. By kind of what you see on the screen right here and how public facilities are defined, collector roadways do fall in that category as potentially impact fee eligible.
And I guess I will say, sorry, just to clarify.
Yeah.
New collector roadways would fall into that category. Maintenance or addressing existing deficiencies on existing collector roadways.
Yeah.
Would not, but sorry.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I was talking about collectors as a big concept.
Yeah.
But kind of going a little bit further, the Impact Fee Act also provides a differentiation between system and project improvements. Again, this is, I think you had a slide on this.
Yeah.
And something that we wanted to call out here is that in terms of how ACHD policy defines collector roadways, and they provide very specific definitions for how these different types of functional classifications, really what their purpose is. And they really fall in that project improvement category of traffic that really goes to serve a specific development or maybe a small group of developments and carry that traffic towards arterials, which really focus on carrying that regional traffic. So that's really kind of what we wanted to call out here, is that, as per ACHD policy, collectors are really considered to be a project. In terms of ACHD practice for collectors, so this highlights how new collectors are constructed via ACHD practice, and then how updates to existing collectors are handled. For new collectors, they're planned and documented on the master street map, which is a long-range planning document, as well as other kind of long-range planning processes that ACHD has. And then when development goes in to a parcel or to an area, they'll construct those roadways, those collector roadways that are already identified within the master street map, as dictated by ACHD policy. We'll talk about this a little more. We see that as generally effective, as it builds that road really when it's needed to serve that adjacent land use, as opposed to going through some sort of prioritization and programming process from ACHD. And that's really, it's fully funded by development. Development takes the lead on coordination with land use partners, and they construct that full roadway. Then after it's constructed, ACHD assumes ownership and maintenance. For existing collectors, these are projects that are typically not impact fee eligible because they're maintenance related, they're addressing existing efficiencies, or oftentimes they're upgrades to meet new standards. And these are really all items that are explicitly noted in the Impact Fee Act as non-impact fee eligible. So since that's the case, improvements to existing collectors are planned and programmed through a variety of different ACHD planning mechanisms, neighborhood plans, asset management plans. Then they make their way towards the prioritization and programming process into the 5-year plan. And they're funded by other sources that are not impact fees. And then kind of the one exception we would like to call out for improvements to existing collectors is there still are cases where development will build frontage improvements on collectors. So similar to like we were talking about with bicycle pedestrian facilities on arterials. So building off of our discussions with the commission and advisory committee and ACHD staff, we really started out by looking at a broad range of options for ways to fund new collectors and also improvements to existing collectors. Those are shown on the screen. The first was, what if we include all new collectors in the CIP and fund them via impact fees instead of the current approach of having development build them. Number two is, what if we reclassify certain collectors? So say a collector is operating more like an arterial, it's funneling regional traffic. That's really how it's functioning. Maybe there'd be some benefit for widening it via impact fees. We look at that option. And then finally, we looked at maintaining the current approach. So keeping collectors off of the CIP and impact fee program, and having growth really be funding new collectors and then other funding sources funding improvements on existing collectors.
You may not know this, but somebody in the room may. Was Oahe Storm between Ustick and Macmillan built by the developer of the high school? Street to street.
It was a partnership between the high school and then there was a residential subdivision.
Okay, but it was built by developers calling the high school a developer.
Yes, yep. It
Okay,
was a
correct.
partnership between the school district and
And
then that.
it's a collector?
Correct.
Okay.
That's right. And they were also responsible for there was signal improvements needed at Ustick, signal improvement. So they were responsible for that portion as well.
And it may already be deficient. Because it really is only a 2-lane road and there's really not,
The challenge with that one is that all of that development was on the east side. So they're waiting for the development on the west side to finish out that
so
cross
will
section.
they be expanding the roadway then with that other side?
I mean, I don't have the specifics, but I'm assuming it will have to.
Because right now it would be okay.
Yeah, so when you have just on one side, we can't require,
No,
we can require half plus, so you get basically a 2-lane
no,
segment.
okay.
But when the other side goes in, they'll do all the rest and like a 3-lane.
So
And then when
But it's not the ultimate.
That's not the ultimate, no.
And so when you do expand that expansion piece will not be impact fee eligible, right?
Correct, that is through development. So when the other side comes in to develop that other side, they'll be required to do their half of the collector.
But the acquisition of the right of way is impact fee eligible.
No.
It's not.
Collectors.
Not for
not-
collectors.
Not yet.
They're not impact fee
Not
eligible,
yet.
not even right of way.
Yeah, all those components we were talking about in the previous half of the conversation,
yeah.
that was kind of focused on
Yeah.
arterial.
Related to
projects.
arterials. Yeah, sorry. Good
We're kind of
clarification.
crossing some wires here.
No, it's okay.
So as we went through those options, we really thought that it boiled down to the questions that we see on the screen here. Number one, is the existing approach the most effective way to complete new collector roadways? Number two, how do we address updates to existing collectors? And then finally, are communities with limited arterial roads receiving benefits from impact fees? And I'm going to walk through each of these one by one here.
Okay.
So the first question, is the existing approach the most effective way to fund and complete new collector roadways? Based on our evaluation of the history of ACHD's current approach and other potential options, our answer is yes. ACHD's approach is the most effective at constructing new collectors. And we think that this is really summarized best by the 3 points you see on the screen. Number one being that new collectors are fully funded and constructed by growth at no capital cost to ACHD. And really the only resource needed from ACHD is staff time to review proposed roadway designs and confirm that the collectors are meeting standards. Number two, growth constructs the full cross section of new collectors. So that includes bicycle pedestrian facilities and intersection improvements in accordance with ACHD policy and standards. Just want to contrast this to kind of what we talked about in the previous presentation, where projects on new arterials that are funded via impact fees, those certain components need to be funded via other sources. And then number three, new collectors are built by development when needed to serve adjacent land uses. And we think this is important as it helps coordinate the needs between land use and transportation elements of development and provides more flexibility just to meet those needs. And then it also takes the burden of project prioritization and programming of new collector construction off of ACHD staff. And they don't really have to go in and say, okay, when exactly are these different areas going to be developed? When our roadway is going to be needed here? And that's really just all on development to coordinate.
Yeah, I think the Oahe storm is a great example of that. That would have probably required at least 5, if not more years prior to the high school being opened for ACHD and the high school to say, well, in about 5 or 8 years, we are going to put a high school here and it's going to open around this time. And then ACHD would have had to say, well, do we have enough impact fees to fund the collector there? Have we collected enough of it? And if we have, okay, well, let's get that into our 5-year work plan and prioritize it about the same time that your high school is going in. And for all of that magic to, magically come together for the opening day of the high school. So it's a lot of coordination on a lot. And, the same thing would happen if it was a subdivision or a commercial development. So it's a lot of extra coordination, and we all know how plans change and how different things happen. And so this is, as Mark said, this is a way where when the development is going in, they build that collector and it's all there ready for day one for them to use it when it's needed.
Thanks, Sonia.
Yeah.
So this next slide, this shows the master street map and collectors that were constructed from 2014 to 2024. So all those little purple lines that you can see up there. And really in all of these cases, development occurred adjacent to these future collectors that were already identified on the map, and development was required to build these collectors as per ACHD policy.
These were new collectors,
That's correct.
Correct.
Yep,
the purple, not enlarging or rebuilding, but new.
correct.
That's exactly correct. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, over the past 10 years, there have been about 40 miles of new collectors constructed using high-level dollar estimates, about $150 million worth of investment, and that's been made entirely by growth with limited support and resources needed from ACHD. So yeah, we just thought this was a good way at illustrating how effective development has been just in constructing out this network. So we wanted to provide just a specific example. I know the Hawaii storm has also been a good example that we've tossed around. This is the Oaks Way collector in Meridian. So just
Actually, just to
Rustic
the
oak.
east of Oahe Square.
It's rustic oak.
oh, is that what it's called? Okay. I've been saying Oak Way, but thank you for the.
I drive it. It's rustic oak.
Okay.
We believe you.
And the fact you can go north to Chinden, even if you can only turn right, is pretty cool to stay away from Blackgate.
There you go. Well, this is an example of a road where when the single family housing development came in, Rustic Oak was already identified as a mid-mile collector on the master street map. And they were required as per ACHD policy to essentially go and build out this mile worth of road simultaneously with that land use development. And that included bike lanes and sidewalks, as you're probably aware in terms of what that cross
Got
section.
a 10 or a 12 on the east side and the west down through the middle of it. 10 or 12-foot sidewalks.
Bigger there. Yeah.
Even,
I-
yeah.
Yeah, that may have been a decision by the developer. We have minimum standards, but they may have gone wider.
Yeah.
There.
Very nice.
So I had an example that, you could relate to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my house is the third one from the right in the corner down there.
Nice.
All right. And so just, I guess to kind of close out this slide, we think this is an effective policy in that it benefits ACHD since at essentially no cost, development goes in and builds out their collector network. And then it also benefits development by ensuring that the timing of land use and roadway improvements go in at the same time.
Takes pressure off the adjacent arterials.
Exactly right. So, kind of closing slide, just to close out this section, but just to reiterate, we think the current approach is most effective based on the 3 items you see on that screen. So number 1, really putting the full fiscal and construction responsibility on growth. Number 2, coordinating the timing of development and roadway network at the same time. And then finally, giving development flexibility for unique situations and needs that arise, especially when looking at interactions between land use and transportation. So I know we're running out of time here, so I'll try to go fast. The next question we had was, how do we address updates to existing collectors, the really shifting gears from construction of new collectors? So the needs on existing collectors are typically identified through input from partner agencies, public input, neighborhood plans, other planning processes. And really the majority of these needs result in projects related to bicycle pedestrian facilities, speed management, safety, and some of the other categories that you see on this screen. And these are typically, as we've kind of stated throughout this presentation, these are typically not impact fee eligible as they're related to maintenance, updates to new standards, and addressing existing deficiencies. So all items that are specifically called out in the Impact Fee Act as non-impact fee eligible. So really just taking this all this information into consideration, we do not see the use of impact fees for funding of typical ACHD projects on existing collectors as impact fee eligible.
Now, just get you, some of those 6 on your slide are precluded by ACHD decision and some by state law.
I think on
Is that
this-
correct?
I think on this slide,
So
when we think about it as an existing collector that's there today, that maybe have some of these existing deficiencies, all of these things on this slide would be precluded by what is outlined in the Impact Fee Act.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, okay, all right.
For instance, in your own home roadway collector is a good example of this, but it hasn't been that long ago that you've started requiring 10-foot sidewalks or multi-use pathways along collectors. So I don't know when that happened, but
Recently.
that transition has occurred. So now the new ones are having the wider facilities. You've got old ones that are still gonna be 5-foot sidewalks and maybe even some attached.
Some 3.
Some gaps, yeah.
Yeah, well,
And that's a good point, because I think it's almost less about the types of projects, but almost like what they are in nature, and that's what makes them non-impact fee eligible, because there are updates to new standards that weren't around when the road was constructed. It's an existing deficiency as per ACHD standards.
Yeah, you're not increasing the capacity of the road. Most of the deficiencies on collectors, it's not a capacity issue for vehicular capacity, it's lack of infrastructure for other modes.
Okay.
And just to clarify, the 10-foot is only arterials, it's not collectors.
I'm sorry.
The 10-foot multi-use is only arterials, not collectors. collectors, you can still do like a detached sidewalk and bike lanes. Some are choosing to do multi-use, but it's not required to do that.
Well, if you take bike paths off the road, then you have to do the 10-foot.
That's what I'm saying, they're choosing. We could either do on street, or if they choose to do a multi-use, we're not required.
Yeah. So we've actually, in our Pinnacle project, the earlier elements have gone with the bike paths in the streets, as the standard was at that point, 5-foot detached sidewalk. And now we've got some new stuff coming that we're going to go with the 10-foot facility. So kind of a schizophrenic experience.
A little bit like that on the arterial.
And I think this is a good spot to share where we presented this to the commission, and they shared that they were frustrated with the limitations of the state statute, just what they could fund. So there was definitely understanding from them in this regard, but frustration in terms of kind of the lack of flexibility they had with how they could use these funds.
Well, why, I know you want to get on, why the word typically not?
So there
They
is
just plain aren't, right?
the only exception I would say is in the rare case where a collector might need to be widened to 3 lanes, from 2 lanes to 3 lanes. So there's a center turn lane, because there are arterial roadways in ACHD's jurisdiction where that is the case. They're 2 lanes today. And then because of vehicular capacity, there's the need in the future to widen them to 3 lanes.
So it becomes essentially a minor arterial.
Exactly. And ACHD's practice in that case is essentially to reclassify the road to an arterial, because basically in all those cases where there is the need to widen it, that road is likely functioning as an arterial just based off of ACHD's definitions in their policy. And they can reclassify it to a minor residential arterial, minor arterial, and then widening to from 2 to 3 lanes would be impact fee eligible.
With impact.
Correct, yeah. I think that's the main use of that word typical.
I think, I mean,
examples.
typically, it's sort of that never say never thing. I would say 99.9%, they're not impact fee eligible. There may be the one outlier somewhere, but it's pretty much none of them are, yes.
Thanks, we were asking for that question by using the word typically, so.
It's not 100%, only 99.
Yeah, exactly. We've got enough lawyers. I'm sure. Yeah, so this slide, we'll go through it, but this is really just to illustrate kind of all these other processes and documents that do identify improvements to existing collector roads.
Yeah, not saying that those improvements to collector roads are not important. They're very important. Just impact fees, you know, out of all of these, the CIP and the impact fee is not the mechanism that unfortunately can be used to fund those.
Yeah, what was our point on this slide?
Our point on this slide was just a
Why is this in here?
Now,
This is one of the last changes on the compliance issue.
just a reminder that of those projects that do meet the Impact Fee Act requirements and can be impact fee eligible, ACHD is currently only collecting about 66% of the cost of those for impact fees. One approach, if we wanted to tighten that gap up a little bit and collect more than 66% of the costs, that would free up some of the money that ACHD currently needs to spend to make up that difference for those projects that aren't impact fee eligible. And maybe that would allow more of them to get into the 5-year work plan. Not a recommendation at this point, but just something to be aware of and consider.
I think we're relating this all back to
Yeah.
how it connects to impact.
To range of projects and impact fees, yeah.
So the last question that we wanted to run through here, and this is a question that we've heard quite a bit, especially from some of these smaller jurisdictions like Garden City, Star, Eagle, and that's really our communities with limited arterial roads within their boundaries still receiving benefits from impact fees. So yeah, this graph right here shows the number of miles of arterial roadways in each land use agency in Ada County. And as you can see, there really is a stark difference in the type of roadways that each agency has within their boundaries. So you have over 100 miles in Boise, you're kind of over that 60-mile range at Meridian, CUNA, and then quite a few, so less than 20 and Garden City and Star. So we really just wanted to start here to acknowledge just the differences in these roadway systems, and acknowledge why somebody living in one of these communities might not see many projects that are funded via impact fees within their boundaries. Why they might not feel like they're receiving benefits from impact fees, but we didn't really feel like this told the whole story kind of that question. So this slide might look familiar. I think we shared it when we were talking about service areas a while back. And it really shows the average trip length for each trip beginning and ending within each jurisdiction. And you can see that there's an average of about 9 miles, with the average trip length in each jurisdiction being pretty close. So kind of within that 8 to 12 mile range. And really the point of this slide is just to show that the majority of trips in Ada County, particularly in these geographically smaller jurisdictions like Star and Garden City, they still are leaving the boundaries of their jurisdiction on most trips and traveling communities that do have this kind of more robust built out arterial network that was funded via impact fees. So while we do want to acknowledge the concerns that residents of some of these cities have about impact fees being spent on projects with their boundaries, the data does show us that people are still traveling outside of their jurisdiction and utilizing those roadway networks kind of outside of their jurisdiction boundaries. And we realize there's always kind of these case-to-case bases where there are trips that might not, travel on an arterial basis, but just as on a whole, kind of looking at averages, we do see most folks within Ada County using that arterial system on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'll pick on Garden City because they're not here today, but can definitely understand Garden City isn't getting a lot of CIP projects in the Garden City boundary. But this data shows that growth from Garden City is driving on the arterials in Boise or Meridian or Eagle. So they are getting value from those impact fee projects that there when they have to go to work or go to their recreation or go shopping or wherever they're going on these typical trips. Just the projects are in a different location, but they still get to use them, still get to benefit up from them and during their travel.
So last slide for this group here. So we did want to highlight just one final item in the ACHD's process related to this. And yet, Mr. Steed, I think this hits on the same question you asked earlier in terms of what are potential impact fee eligible projects on the collectors. And so essentially with every update to ACHD's master street map, there is the opportunity to reclassify collectors as arterials, just as staff looks at the data on these roads, here's input from partner agencies, there is that opportunity. Here, one example, Pollard Lane and Plummer Road, those were both previously collectors. And then in this last year, just throughout that process of looking at traffic data, having discussions with the partner agencies, they were reclassified as residential arterials. So if future vehicle deficiencies were identified on those in the CIP process and projects were identified, then those would be eligible for YT via impact fees. So yeah, just wanted to highlight that this is a current ACHD practice that staff does to kind of address, the changes on the roadway system. So this slide summarizes the recommendation that we shared with the ACHD Commission.
And this is a bit unique because we haven't actually presented a recommendation to them for any of the other topics so far, just like we haven't presented a recommendation to this group. But for this topic,
This applies to
collectors only.
That's correct.
The information was very clear cut in our minds, so we wanted to just really boil it down to here's what we're seeing. Tell us if you think it's wrong. So yeah, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, and I won't spend too much time here since we've just been driving the point home over the last 15 slides here. But for the construction of new collectors, really our recommendation is maintain the current practice of having development lead the charge there, build it in conjunction with land use. On existing collectors, we've found that the majority of updates that ACHD does make on existing collectors are not impact fee eligible. So our recommendation is to focus on using other funds to decide impact fees to fund those improvements. And then finally, we do think that, that on that last slide, that process of reviewing the master street map and the CIP for potential changes to roadway classification. Yeah, it will just be beneficial in making sure that ACHD is spending impact fee dollars where they can and on roads that should be funded in impact fees. That's all we had for you, and this was our recommendation to the commission. I think I shared, kind of the main reaction they had. I think they were generally in agreement with the rest of the elements that we showed here.
So could you go back to slide 2, please? All the way we're back.
All the way.
It's just a schedule.
Yes.
See exactly, okay, where,
Yep.
yes. So the next slide actually shows where we are.
Correct.
Oh, yep.
There you go.
Maybe just on schedule, so the goal for this project is to have a 2025 CIP and a new impact fee schedule adopted by the end of this calendar year, so by December 2025. As Edison said, we still need to present to this group and the commission. There's one more topic area, that analysis time period. So we need to present that. And then from there, we need to, we're going to have a presentation that ties these 4 topics together. And we need to get from this group as well as the commission, how do you actually want to move forward on these topics? Do you want to make changes to any of these for this new CIP? And then once we have that, which our goal is to get that information, that direction. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but probably at the end of the spring or by latest early summer. Because then we need to actually go and say, here are your actual CIP projects. Here are the costs for them based on those, the direction you provided us for service area and range of projects and collector roadways, all of the above. Here's what that shakes out to in terms of what impact fees look like. And we assume there's going to be input on that, maybe some updates based on the input from this group, from the commission, to get that all ready for adoption by the end of the year.
And we will be asked for our reaction prior to commission.
So,
That's a question.
Yeah.
so, I think that we will.
Is that correct?
Yes, so our goal is to always, after presenting to the commission, come back to the CAC to collect your feedback. And that way we can also address and inform the commission regarding some of the conversations that are happening on this meeting. So our goal is to absolutely come get the recommendation from the CAC. As we go and present to the commission, we have what the committee's recommendation to them.
So do you, Mr. Chairman, do we have a meeting scheduled to kind of draw that to the conclusion for the recommendation?
They said they had one more, whatever you call it, section or
One more focus area.
focus area
Yeah.
before getting to the, what do you think, right?
Yes, so in the next couple, well, for the rest of this year, we'll be a little bit more engaged and we'll have more meetings on the CIC schedule just because of the things that we're in the stage that we currently are. So if we're planning for a March presentation for the period analysis, we would be aiming for the following week after we present to the commission, or the 2 weeks from that, somewhere close, so we can present to the CACs. And then we'll plan to come back with a summary, once again, just to collect that feedback before we go to.
And then after that, we would have a meeting where we, show from the analysis, here's what the projects that have been identified look
Right.
like, and the input from there. Yeah.
Questions? Comments? I have a question for staff.
Yes. Got several here. Take your pick.
The question of whether or not we have a quorum today. Different entities,
say that's a
different
Brianne question.
entities have done this differently. If we count 2 vacant seats as a total of 9 persons on this group, we don't have a quorum today. But if we count this 7, we have a quorum. What's the answer?
That is up to your discretion where you are acting president.
Your discretion from as acting president.
Mine alone?
She gave you all the power.
Yeah, right.
I guess the question is, we actually do, instead of having 9 members, we actually only have 7.
Correct.
Based on, okay,
I have been in groups that count the vacancies as part of it. I've had others that don't. I've never gone into the law books to figure out what the right answer is. But what's the group's desire? Do y'all want to step back and go through the action items quickly here and get it done, or do you wish to let them hang until the next meeting?
I think we can handle them today.
Got another moment?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, anything else?
No, thank you for your time and thank you for your input. Very helpful. Yeah, appreciate it.
Well, on that basis, Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the minutes of both meetings, and move for approval.
We have a motion for approval of minutes of the June and the August meeting. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next item is election of a chair for the 2025 calendar year. I would entertain position if you wish to let me have it, but I promised my wife I would never campaign for anything again. With that being said, we'll open the floor for nominations for chair of the CICAC for 2025.
Mr. Steve, I pulled up the bylaws and it does say in the CICAC bylaws, 5 members must be present to establish.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we know.
Now, yeah, I'm glad.
We know the official answer.
Okay. Well, we need to work on attendance. And we need to work on filling 2 slots.
yes.
And you can step back and put a line through a couple of things.
Got it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
That was quick. I've got a copy of them with me, but I couldn't have read them that fast. Okay, any other business?
Thank you.
Chairman's prerogative, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got 2 committees. One of them requires that I do approve to adjourn, and another one says, why are you doing that?